When I saw the young woman with a newborn baby sitting outside the grocery store with all her belongings in a cardboard box, I knew I had to help, even though my family was already struggling financially. As a father of two special needs children facing mounting medical bills, I barely had enough money for groceries, but I couldn't walk past a mother and baby who had nowhere to sleep. You won't believe what happened next. I never expected giving Jessica the keys to my apartment would lead to meeting her brother Marcus, or that my simple act of kindness was actually being tested by someone who could change my family's life forever. Sometimes, when you help others without expecting anything in return, the universe finds a way to reward your compassion in ways you never saw coming. Hi everyone, welcome to Life's Changing Stories. Now let's dive into today's story. The cramped three-bedroom house that Benjamin Carter shared with his wife Rebecca and their two special needs children had become increasingly difficult to maintain financially over the past 18 months, as mounting medical bills, therapy costs, and specialized equipment expenses consumed nearly every dollar that came into their household, despite Benjamin's careful budgeting and Rebecca's exhausting schedule of double shifts at the local diner. At 42, Benjamin had been forced to leave his construction job 2 years earlier when his 8-year-old son Lucas was diagnosed with severe autism and his 6-year-old daughter Emma required full-time care for her developmental disabilities, making it impossible for both parents to work outside the home while ensuring their children received the constant attention and specialized care they needed. Benjamin's financial stability depended heavily on rental income from a small 2-bedroom apartment that his deceased father had left him 5 years earlier, a property that had provided a modest but reliable monthly income until Rebecca's recent illness had forced her to take unpaid leave from work for 3 months, leaving the family entirely dependent on rent payments that barely covered their essential expenses. The apartment had been on the market for 6 weeks, and Benjamin was desperately hoping to find a buyer who would pay enough to cover their accumulated medical debt and provide a small cushion for future emergencies that seemed to arrive with increasing frequency. Rebecca had returned to work at the diner just 2 weeks earlier, but her recovery from pneumonia had left her weakened and struggling to handle the physical demands of waitressing while maintaining the energy needed to care for Lucas and Emma during her time at home. Benjamin managed most of the children's daily care, including administering medications, coordinating therapy appointments, and handling the behavioral challenges that required patience, consistency, and specialized training that he had learned through necessity rather than formal education. The financial pressure on their family had intensified recently when their health insurance company had denied coverage for several recommended therapies that could significantly improve Lucas and Emma's quality of life, forcing Benjamin and Rebecca to choose between essential treatments and basic household expenses like groceries, utilities, and car repairs that couldn't be delayed indefinitely. On this particular afternoon, Benjamin was shopping for groceries with a carefully calculated budget that allowed for only the most basic necessities, comparing prices and using coupons to stretch their limited funds as far as possible, while trying to maintain adequate nutrition for his family's specific dietary needs and medical requirements. Benjamin Carter pushed his cart through the aisles of Murphy's Grocery, mentally calculating the cost of each item and comparing prices with the methodical precision of someone who understood that every dollar mattered when providing for a family with two special needs children. At 42, Benjamin had developed an expertise in stretching limited resources that he never wanted to possess, but that had become essential for managing the constant financial pressure created by medical bills, therapy costs, and specialized equipment that insurance companies seemed determined to avoid covering. Benjamin's morning routine typically involved preparing medications for both Lucas and Emma, coordinating with their therapists and teachers, and ensuring that Rebecca had everything she needed before leaving for her shifts at Murphy's Diner, where she worked long hours serving customers while maintaining the cheerful demeanor that kept her tips adequate for covering their basic expenses. The grocery shopping represented one of Benjamin's few opportunities to leave the house alone, and he approached it with the same careful planning that characterized every aspect of their family's survival strategy. As Benjamin was selecting generic brands and calculating unit prices in the produce section, a young woman approached him with obvious hesitation and embarrassment, clearly struggling to ask for help from a complete stranger. "Excuse me," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the background noise of the grocery store. "I'm really sorry to bother you, but I'm extremely thirsty and I don't have any money. Could you possibly buy me a bottle of water?" Benjamin looked at the woman more carefully and noticed that she appeared to be in her early 20s, with clothing that seemed clean but worn, and an expression of desperation that he recognized from his own most difficult moments. Despite having only $43 for groceries that needed to last his family for the next week, Benjamin felt compelled to help someone who seemed to be in even more desperate circumstances than his own family. "Of course," Benjamin replied immediately, adding a bottle of water to his cart without hesitation. "No problem at all." The young woman introduced herself as Jessica and thanked Benjamin profusely for his kindness, clearly grateful for such a simple gesture that most people might take for granted. Benjamin paid for his groceries and the water, handed it to Jessica, and wished her well before heading toward the parking lot with his modest collection of basic necessities. As Benjamin was loading his groceries into his car, he noticed Jessica sitting on the sidewalk outside the store next to a large cardboard box that appeared to contain clothing, blankets, and personal belongings. In her arms, she was holding what Benjamin realized was a newborn baby, probably no more than a few weeks old, wrapped in a thin blanket that provided minimal protection against the afternoon heat and sun. The sight of a young mother and infant living on the streets triggered every parental instinct that Benjamin possessed, overwhelming his rational concerns about his own family's financial limitations and creating an immediate need to take action that would protect a vulnerable child from dangerous conditions. "Jessica," Benjamin called out, approaching her with the careful, non-threatening manner he had learned to use with Lucas during his most anxious moments. "Are you and your baby okay? Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" Jessica looked up at Benjamin with tears in her eyes, clearly exhausted and overwhelmed by circumstances that had left her without options or resources for caring for her infant child. "We've been sleeping outside for 3 days," Jessica admitted, her voice breaking with emotion and desperation. "I lost my apartment when I couldn't work after the baby was born, and I don't have anywhere else to go. I'm scared about what's going to happen when it gets dark." Benjamin felt his heart breaking as he looked at the newborn baby who reminded him of Lucas and Emma when they were infants, helpless and dependent on adults to provide safety, warmth, and protection from a world that could be harsh and unforgiving to the most vulnerable members of society. "I have an apartment that's been empty for a week," Benjamin said, making a decision that he knew Rebecca would question, but that felt absolutely necessary given the circumstances. "It's furnished and ready to live in. You and your baby can stay there until you get back on your feet." Jessica stared at Benjamin in disbelief, clearly struggling to process such an unexpected offer from a stranger who had no obligation to help her beyond the bottle of water he had already provided. "I can't accept that," Jessica protested. "I don't have money for rent, and I don't want to be a burden to someone who's already being so kind to me." "You wouldn't be a burden," Benjamin assured her, thinking about his own children and the terror he would feel if they were ever in similar circumstances. "I'm a father, and I know what it feels like to feel helpless when you're trying to protect your children." No baby should be sleeping outside in this heat. Benjamin drove Jessica and her baby to the apartment building, gave her the keys, and removed the for sale sign from the front yard, knowing that this decision would delay his ability to pay off their medical debt, but feeling certain that protecting a mother and infant was more important than his own financial concerns. "Stay as long as you need to," Benjamin told Jessica as he showed her around the furnished apartment that had been his only hope for generating quick cash to resolve their mounting bills. "The utilities are on, there's food in the kitchen, and you don't need to worry about anything except taking care of your baby." That evening, Benjamin explained his decision to Rebecca, who was understandably concerned about the financial implications of removing their apartment from the market when they desperately needed the income from a sale. "Benjamin, that apartment was our only way out of this financial hole," Rebecca said, her voice reflecting the stress and exhaustion of working double shifts while caring for two special needs children. "How long is she going to stay? It could be months or even years before she gets back on her feet." Rebecca's concerns were completely valid, and Benjamin understood her frustration with his decision to prioritize a stranger's welfare over their own family's financial security. She had been working herself to exhaustion, trying to generate enough income to cover their basic expenses, and the prospect of indefinitely delaying their only source of significant revenue felt overwhelming and potentially catastrophic. "The world is a cruel and selfish place," Rebecca continued, her voice reflecting months of accumulated stress and disappointment. "You should have minded your own business, instead of getting involved in someone else's problems when we can barely handle our own." Benjamin tried to reassure Rebecca that they would find alternative solutions to their financial challenges, but he understood her anger and recognized that his decision had created additional pressure on a family that was already struggling to survive. Due to Rebecca's continued upset about the situation, Benjamin avoided visiting Jessica for nearly a week, hoping that time would help resolve the tension in his marriage while giving Jessica space to adjust to her new living situation. Exactly 1 week after giving Jessica the keys to his apartment, Benjamin decided to check on her and the baby to ensure they were safe and had everything they needed. When he knocked on the apartment door, Benjamin was shocked to see that Jessica was not alone. Standing beside her was a well-dressed man in his 30s who appeared to be examining the apartment with the critical eye of someone evaluating real estate. "Benjamin," Jessica said, with a smile that seemed different from the desperate gratitude he had seen a week earlier, "I'd like you to meet my brother, Marcus Thompson." Marcus Thompson was a name that Benjamin recognized immediately, as he was one of the wealthiest real estate developers in their region and a frequent subject of local newspaper articles about successful business ventures and community philanthropy. Benjamin felt confused and increasingly concerned about why such a prominent person would be visiting Jessica in the apartment he had provided for her as emergency housing. "Jessica has been telling me about your incredible kindness," Marcus said, extending his hand to Benjamin with a warm smile. "I had to come and meet the man who would give up his own financial security to help a stranger and her baby." Jessica's expression became slightly embarrassed as she began explaining the true circumstances that had brought her to Benjamin's attention outside the grocery store. "I need to be completely honest with you," Jessica said, her voice reflecting genuine remorse for the deception she had maintained for a week. "I'm not actually homeless, and this isn't really my baby. My brother and I had a disagreement about whether truly generous people still exist in the world, and he challenged me to find someone who would help a stranger without expecting anything in return." Marcus nodded, confirming Jessica's explanation while studying Benjamin's face to gauge his reaction to this unexpected revelation. "I told Jessica that people today are too self-centered and suspicious to help strangers, especially when they're struggling financially themselves," Marcus explained. She insisted that genuinely kind people still exist, so we made a bet. She would pretend to be homeless with a baby, and if she could find someone willing to make a real sacrifice to help her, I would admit I was wrong about human nature. Benjamin felt a complex mixture of emotions as he processed this information. Relief that Jessica and the baby were safe and cared for, confusion about being the subject of an elaborate test, and uncertainty about what this revelation meant for his family's financial situation. When Jessica couldn't stop talking about the man who gave her his apartment without asking for anything in return, I had to come and see for myself, Marcus continued. I've been in business for 20 years, and I've met very few people who would sacrifice their own financial security to help a complete stranger. Marcus paused before delivering news that would transform Benjamin's understanding of his situation and his family's future. Because of your extraordinary kindness, Jessica and I have decided to buy your apartment, Marcus announced. But instead of paying your asking price, we're going to triple it. Your generosity deserves to be rewarded in a way that will make a real difference in your family's life. Benjamin stood speechless, trying to comprehend how his simple act of compassion had led to an outcome that exceeded his most optimistic hopes for resolving his family's financial crisis. Later that same afternoon, after the paperwork had been completed and the funds had been transferred to his bank account, Benjamin received a notification on his phone showing a deposit that was large enough to pay off all their medical debt, cover their living expenses for the next 2 years, and provide a foundation for building the kind of financial security that had seemed impossible just hours earlier. The transformation in Benjamin's circumstances was immediate and comprehensive. With the substantial payment from Marcus and Jessica, Benjamin was able to pay for all the therapies that Lucas and Emma needed without worrying about insurance coverage or financial constraints. He also used part of the money to open a small bakery for Rebecca, fulfilling her long-time dream of running her own business, and started an online consulting service that allowed him to work from home while continuing to provide full-time care for their children. Benjamin's act of kindness had returned to him in ways that exceeded his most ambitious dreams, proving that true generosity has a way of creating unexpected blessings for those who give without expecting anything in return. His willingness to sacrifice his own financial security to protect a vulnerable mother and child had not only passed Marcus and Jessica's test of human goodness, but had also transformed his family's future in ways that would provide opportunities and security for years to come. The story of Benjamin's compassion became a powerful reminder that the biggest blessings often come when we take a leap of faith and help others even when we feel like we have little to give ourselves. His single act of kindness had demonstrated that genuine human goodness still exists in a world that often seems dominated by selfishness and indifference, and that sometimes the universe finds ways to reward those who choose compassion over self-preservation. Marcus later told Benjamin that he had been testing people's kindness for months without finding anyone willing to make a genuine sacrifice for a stranger, and that Benjamin's immediate willingness to give up his apartment had restored his faith in humanity and reminded him why he had started his philanthropic foundation in the first place. Benjamin's experience proved that kindness is never wasted, even when it requires sacrificing our own comfort or security for the welfare of others. His compassion had not only provided safety for someone he believed was in desperate need, but had also created a chain of generosity that would continue to benefit his own family and inspire others to choose kindness over indifference when faced with opportunities to help those who need it most. The apartment that Benjamin had given away in a moment of pure compassion had returned to him multiplied threefold, along with the knowledge that his actions had made a difference in ways he could never have anticipated. His story became a testament to the power of selfless generosity and the unexpected ways that the universe rewards those who choose love over fear when deciding whether to help strangers in need. We hope you enjoyed today's story of love, life, and betrayal. For more free stories and entertainment from our channel, please hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe with notifications.